and welcome to another REACH Law webinar, this time on the EU REACH microplastic restriction. We're going to focus today in particular on the reporting requirements introduced by the restriction. We have quite a lot of information to give to you today, so we're going to start right away. We've also received quite a few questions in advance, so we're going to try to address some of those as we go. My name is Julian de Cruz. I'm Head of Public Affairs here at REACH Law Finland, and I'm very happy to be your presenter today. Quick word about REACH Law. We're a global company providing support for REACH, but also REACH-like chemical regulations globally. You can see here on the map where we are present and which pieces of legislation we focus on. I'll let you discover those on your screen, but you know, Turkey, UK REACH, Korea REACH, India, and Ukraine, new addition to our network. This is a short summary of all the services we provide. You can find all this information on our website, compliance with all the major chemical regulations, basically, as well as legal and technical services and audits. That's important for today because there's a big auditing component to try and make sense of this REACH restriction. And we'll detail a little bit more today what's tailored, or let's say what specific service for microplastics we can offer you at REACH Law for this piece of legislation. Again, follow us on YouTube. Everything we've talked about before is on there, and this video will be included as well, this webinar. Short disclaimer though, before we go into the heart of things. We make no guarantee about what we say today. These are just our own research, our opinions. Don't rely on this for legal compliance. This is simply an informational webinar. So disclaimer is right there on your screen. And now for today's program. We're gonna start from the broad to go to the specific. This microplastics restriction takes place in a specific regulatory landscape, a specific regulatory moment in the EU on plastics and microplastics. So we're going to see where it fits first, very briefly. But then we're going to have a quick, or let's say a run through the scope of the restriction to see if you're affected in the first place, and try to guide you through the thought process that is behind. A lot of your questions are actually on that. Are you in scope at all of this, of the legal obligations of the restriction? So we'll look at that first, and then we'll look at the timelines, because this is a restriction where the application of the law happens in stages according to the different sectors that it targets, but also derogates certain sectors and kicks in those reporting requirements also in a staggered manner. So it's very easy to get lost, and we try to make sense of it all in a visual way for you to give you at least a head start. And then we'll get to the reporting requirements proper. How do they work? What does that entail? What's the job that you have to do? And you will see again that it's not that straightforward. Some part of it is simple, but not everything is. Enforcement will be our last, let's say, part of this very short masterclass, if you will. We've also gotten questions on that. It's not always that simple to figure out, especially if you're new to REACH, how is this actually enforced by national authorities? So we'll tell you. And like I said, we'll briefly tell you how we can help. And as part of that, we'll try and have our Q&A session covered. This will all depend on how skillful I am in going through all this information today. So let's see, and let's get right into it. As I said, this REACH restriction is part of a broad push and strategy by the European Union to tackle microplastics pollution, as it's sometimes called. So let's not spend too much time on that, but today we're going to focus on the left part on this REACH 2023 restriction, which addresses intentionally added microplastics that meets certain size requirements into products, but not only, also by themselves. We'll see that the objective of the EU on this one was to prevent the release of about 500,000 tons of microplastics over a 20-year period. They estimate that there's 42 tons every year of intentional microplastics, so those that are really integrated into products intentionally every year. But the EU does not stop there, and it's good to know this, that there's also a pellet loss regulation that is on the way, and that is actually quite close to becoming law, as it has been adopted by the European Council on first reading already this month, like a few days ago, which means that in all likelihood, the European Parliament's plenary vote will all but guarantee that it becomes law in the EU. We don't expect surprises there, and it's going to be in some ways a kind of partner regulation to the REACH restriction, because it's going to formalize, as we understand, certification and methodologies for emissions calculation in the law. So we really have to keep our eyes open for this one, and we will here at REACH Law, because it will most likely work a bit in tandem with the REACH restriction. It's interesting to know that for those unintentional releases, which are actually the big, it's the big source of microplastics pollution, the policy action from the EU is a bit more scattered, or much more scattered. So it's on the right side of your screen here. And it's mostly focused on monitoring schemes to try and see how much gets out in the environment. And it's here directives for the most part. So the obligations are going to be incumbent on member states to just get a better sense of just how much gets out there in the environment. And you see that it's under different headings of legislation: marine strategy, fertilizing products, drinking water directive, and urban wastewater treatment directive have all components on this monitoring of microplastics emissions. So that's interesting to know, if you will, for the sort of global context of regulating microplastics. And just also interesting to know that there's new standards for tire particle emissions for vehicles under the Euro 7 rules. So that's some might say, unexpected area of policy where you do find microplastics regulation at EU level. So that was just to give you a little bit of a bird's eye view. You can expect more on this, and there's going to be more action from the EU on plastics in general, because that's just something that the executive of the EU is keen to tackle in general. But let's focus on today's restriction. It's small on your screen here. Don't try to squint. You're not meant to read this. It's just to show you how it looks like, because sometimes we hear about the rules and then we don't see the actual. This is the piece of law as you will find it on the EURLEX website. The way it works This is a regulation that introduces into EU law a restriction by amending Annex 17 of the REACH regulation. So Annex 17 is the title where all those restrictions are found. Note that when you find it online, you will find the legal text. So we've left the link here, and I suppose on a video it won't be clickable, but anyway, you can contact us and we'll give it to you, or you can find it through some good Googling. There's been also a corrigendum in June 2025, so the binding legal text is actually found from those two sources we gave you here. And so we just wanted to say, for those people who are not who are joining us today, who may not be familiar with REACH, because you may not all be, right? A lot of our regular subscribers are REACH buffs like we are, but it's important to, because it might be counterintuitive for some, that the REACH regulation, yes, originally was designed to regulate the manufacturing of chemical substances and their safety, but when you look at REACH restrictions, it actually regulates very often articles that can contain chemical substances. So we'll place, for example, bans on certain concentrations of some hazardous substances in articles. So we had one of the questions, I think, was asking, what are the requirements for article manufacturers? So there you go. This is here an example where if you are an article manufacturer that uses microplastics and you're the one integrating the microplastic into the finished article, you will be, there's a good chance that you're in scope. And so you have to reach out to us and pay attention if you have questions. But so, yeah, just one more second maybe on this. It's always nice to show it on the screen as well, because the way REACH restrictions works is you always have two columns. On the left, you have your scope and exclusions from the scope. And on the right side of a restriction in the column 2, you always have the conditions in which the restriction applies, the different component of the restriction. So it's called a restriction, but you could call it restrictions because it's actually an assorted panel of measures on the specific substance or materials, shall we say, to which it applies. And then you have several rules that apply in different scenarios, and that's the column 2. And under those, you can have derogations too. So it's always the same architecture in a restriction, and this is, we're going to spend a bit of time today explaining that, but I think it's important to know that this is the basic way it works. And on top of that, the minute detail of this restriction is actually pretty long, that the European Commission and ECHA have had to issue guidance on top of it to help to interpret the legal text, because it's actually so detailed that to understand if you are covered at all or what you should do, it was already discussed during the decision-making process that led to the adoption of the restriction. The Commission pretty early on then had this mandate to develop additional guidance on the scope. So you can find that on the European Commission's website. It's in two parts. There's one that look at scope and application questions and has some case studies. Very useful, but also in itself opening additional questions. But it also addresses degradation testing, solubility, the different derogations, but it also provides in an annex some Q&As and decision trees, so to kind of help your compliance decisions. And on top of that, ECHA has published this year its own guidance solely on the reporting requirements, how it's done, and how it's supposed to be, just carried out, how it's going to work in practice with the IT system and the format and all that. But of course, that's never enough, is it? Industry also has stepped in, because you will always find a scenario that doesn't fit through the questions or the boxes or the categories of the restriction, and you may still be stuck for answers. So there's actually very good guidance developed both by, on the left side, you see the cosmetics industry. Cosmetics Europe and EFFCI have developed their own set of guidance as well. Also helping with the scope and decision tree, of course, with a focus on cosmetic applications. But you will find that you can actually use this document beyond pure cosmetic uses. So it's a pretty good entry point into the topic. And for emissions reporting per se and emissions calculation, we have the guidance from EUPC, the European Plastic Converters Association, and some labeling guidance from EUPC plus additional plastics association. I forgot to mention to you that all those guidance documents, including the ones from Commission and ECHA, are not legally binding. They are not the law. They are meant to help you applying the law. Now, I always like to say, when it comes from the Commission and ECHA, it's still considered the state of the art. So if you completely diverge your interpretation from those guidance, you're going to have a hard time justifying that to an enforcement authority, even though that's not the law. So don't try to report your emissions on paper, for example, which would be in theory possible, but is not possible if you look at the guidance. You have to do this online. So for industry guidance, it's maybe a bit softer, because there it's just issued by industry. So you could imagine that some member states disagree with the contents in there. So that's why you see also the big disclaimers usually on those documents, that they can't be treated as legal advice, only guidance. Now on emissions reporting, I just wanted to spend a couple more minutes on that, and sorry for the very small text here, because this is important and many of you have asked about that, and we've had to do a bit of research ourselves. If you look at the Commission's guidance, the Commission says that ECHA will not provide a methodology for estimating the releases. So it's been left to the choice of the industry, as you can see, to develop their own reporting standards that you have. Apologies, I can't remember what stands behind the SPERCs, but some of you might. But it's basically your own methodology, sector by sector. Now, having said that, the guidance that we just mentioned from EUPC is also derived from a European initiative that is also backed by Operation Clean Sweep, which provides both a methodology, and a certification system for those operational losses that are on site. So we've met already a few clients who are using this system, and we know also from our contacts within the industry that this is also becoming de facto kind of state-of-the-art method. Is well known by the Commission and by the member states. So at this point, we would advise to look into this, but we can also help you with this, because this bow tie model that is explained here basically calculates potential losses of microplastics by looking at the collection. To make it very simple, I don't want to get too much into detail at the mitigation barriers, looking at several scenarios. This bow tie model, you can find it open source online for free and apply it yourself. but it's a job in itself. So this is something that, of course, we can always discuss. For the transport losses, the EU PC guidance informs us that normally transport operators themselves are not considered downstream users under REACH, so they're not normally required to report. However, the party that is contractually liable for the material at the time of the emission will have to report. So if you're also transporting as well, there might be situations where you might have to report for the transportation. So again, this is one that is a bit borderline, and where even in the guidance, you can see the wording is very careful here. This is one where for transport losses, we would advise to look at it in an ad hoc manner. So just get in touch, and we have to look at every single scenario to see if you're indeed under the reporting obligation. Now, we know that there's all this guidance and information out there, but we just wanted to distill to you, and it's a challenge, very briefly, how it works to figure out whether you're in scope of this or not. And by the way, in those guidance documents, you have more detailed flow charts to help your decision. But here it's a sort of very basic visual representation of how it works. And here, there's always something that misses from the slide the moment you show it. So I apologize for the first box where you have some pieces missing. I have a different version of this slide somewhere, but we're just going to keep it very high level here. And again, this is important for those of you who have to apply REACH for the first time, because you were simply not under any REACH obligations before. So why I wanted to show you this is to say that to determine whether you're in scope or not, you have to look beyond the REACH restriction itself. You have to look at the whole legal text of REACH, of course. So you have to see first if you are a substance versus an article. And for this, there's a whole host of information from the legal definition in REACH itself, whether chemical composition versus function and so on. Some of you know this, but there's guidance in itself, so it's not always clear whether you're a substance or an article. But then you have to see if you're a polymer and also a solid polymer, because the restriction apply to solid polymer particles. So again, here you have to see if you fit in the definition of polymer. So it's one of the sub paragraphs under Article 3. And then solid as opposed to liquid or gas. And this actually is defined in the REACH restriction itself. What counts as gas or liquid in the column on the left in column 1. But then on top of that, it has to be contained in particle or build a continuous surface coating on particles. So here again, you have another layer of definition. And then there's the size criteria. And you have two options here. Either all dimensions are below 5 millimeter, or then you have a length and size, length to diameter ratio. This is for, as we understand, kind of fibrous materials. So that's why you have those two alternatives. And that normally determines whether you're the polymer, just a solid polymer microplastic, is in scope or not as a substance, let's say, if I shall say it like this. But then, of course, you need to be either placed on the market on your own, or intentionally added. So it's actually not used in the REACH restriction. Those words intentionally added. It's used in the recitals, and it was used during the whole decision-making procedure, but it's not there in the legal text actually. So present to confer a sought after characteristic. And then in that case, it's the restriction works as a placing on the market ban. But we couldn't fit it all on the slide. There's exclusion criteria from column 1. So some of those polymers will not be in scope of the restriction at all if they result from natural polymerization, if they are degradable, and there's an appendix to the restriction to give you the test methods to that. If they are soluble above 2 grams per liter, I'm going relatively fast here because this is not the primary focus of today, or if there's no carbon atoms in the chemical structure. I'm going fast, but in practice, it's not an easy determination to make. And for this, you also need specialist advice and actually testing data to prove whether you fit one of those or not. And it's very important to follow validated methods. So they are listed in Appendix 15 and 16 for the degradation and the solubility. But it's, again here, you know, we really encourage people to come to us with their questions after the webinar we can answer ad hoc, let's say, because even though there's a lot of criteria listed in the appendices themselves, there's still, as we understand, some areas for doubt. And that's, you can see between the lines of the guidance as well. So do reach out if you're in doubt whether you fit any of those. Finally, this might be familiar, maybe because that's usually what you see on the headlines for this restriction. The entry into force of the placing on the market bans is staged, staggered, let's say, according to different timelines. So here we just show you how it goes for the different by year, because when you read the text, it's a bit heavy. So here you have it in visual form. You know, you can just look at it for 5 seconds. I'm not gonna read them all. I think this is probably known to most of you. But this is where it gets interesting. Now we are talking about the derogated uses. So when we talk about the derogated uses, they are derogated from the placing on the market ban, but they are not derogated from the restriction at all. These were those that were excluded. You remember that some polymers were excluded, but these are uses that are derogated from the main obligation. They do have other obligations, and this is where your reporting requirement comes in. And all those in blue with the thin blue lines that you see here will have to report as of 31st of May 2027, but there's an exception for manufacturers and downstream users of SPMs in the form of pellet, flakes, and powders in plastic manufacturing at industrial sites. And for those, it starts next year. And there you have a reporting requirements of the emissions. We're going to get to what it means next. Important to say as well that you have the concentration reporting requirements, safe use and labeling requirements starting for the uses at industrial sites as of already this year. And then we don't have here on this slide, but please also do come to us if you have this, but there's also the safe use and labeling requirements for those other sectors. Already also as of, I think it's also on a staggered timeline. As today we're about the reporting requirements, we didn't focus too much on the labeling, but if you do have questions on those, and it's also covered in those guidance documents, please do reach out. And again, it would be too easy if we didn't have additional derogations, but this is also, again, good for you. So some SPMs are derogated from the placing on the market ban, not because of the sector they're in, but because of the minimized risk that they present. Either they're contained by technical means or they have physical properties permanently modified during intended end use, or they're permanently incorporated into a solid matrix. And in that case, again, you have the emissions reporting requirement starting 31st of May 2027. Again, here, to actually prove that you fall under one of those derogated uses, this is something that you would have to follow, again, validated test methods and so on. But that's also another area where this is new. So there's going to be an amount of testing the waters with the competent authorities. So that's, again, if you fall into one of those three boxes, there's going to be need for a dedicated conversation if you're wondering how you prove those. But now let's get into the reporting obligation in itself. Once you've jumped all those hoops and it's 100% clear to you, you have to report your emissions. What do you have to report and how? Well, ECHA has it all covered for you in their guidance. So it's not we are showing it to you in a nutshell. It's not a guidance in a nutshell because they have those kind of documents too, but it's a guidance, a guidance document. You're gonna have to report via a substance ID that is actually following a number of codes from customs, from the customs world that are listed in the guidance, and you have to determine for each SPM if you fall under each one of those, and then you choose. So you're going to then have to create what is called a Euclid file on and this is available if you have a REACH IT account with ECHA. So you have to set that up. If, in case you're not a REACH registrant or you've never been involved with REACH, this will be new to you, but you have to set that up and you need to have this Euclid file. And then you're gonna have to choose for each SPM in which category you fall, following those HS codes. You're gonna have to refer to which derogation you are making reference to, because remember, you are derogated. So you have to say, this is because I'm under sector X, Y, or Z, and there should be a short description of the use as well. So and like we said earlier, this might cover transport emissions, depending on your role in the supply chain. So it's both simple in the sense that once you get to the page and you get to do it, it looks simple, but it's also complicated because you're gonna have to make choices to see where you fit. And where also you are the first ones to do it. And for some of you, you are new with REACH completely. So there's a fair amount of strategizing to be done, even though the process on the side of it looks simple. We've been asked what ECHA does with this information, because we can understand that you feel nervous about sending your emissions data to EU body. So ECHA will not publish the data company by company, okay? but they're gonna publish statistics every year. So you're gonna have, we can expect yearly consolidated reports. So the Commission's guidance give this mandate to ECHA, if you will, or just outlines the mandate it has given to ECHA. And it's up to the Commission and member states to identify if there are big sources of emissions, big uses that causes issues in their views, and see if they can have further risk management of those, which can be anything under the sun. Another REACH restriction could be one, etc., etc. But the idea is to always consolidate this regulatory landscape that we've seen at the beginning. So the data is going to inform the laws that come in the future. So when it comes to enforcement, just reminding you of some basics for those who are new to this. Yes, it's an EU regulation, but the enforcement is always up to the member states. We've put a few flags up there. There's more than that, you know this. 28. But basically, in each member state, it's going to vary the level of how local this is, and this is going to be your local laws that apply on who performs the check. But the regulation allows them to request all the information that we've listed on the right. So that's a bit different than what you report on the ECHA portal, okay? Because here we are talking about exact identity of the polymer. We are not talking about those HS codes and their intended function. So it goes much deeper, information on the molecular structural formula, optical activity in ratio of isomers, molecular weight. So you actually have a bunch of analytical data basically here to be able to provide if you're asked. So it's important to remember that you may have done all your homework with the reporting side of things, but you still need detailed information on the polymer that you place on the market. And I'm tempted to say derogated or not, because even if you feel that you are derogated and you only had to report emissions, a member state may disagree and may well ask for all this information here to cross-check, to double-check. So this is important too. And if you have any doubts about what is behind any of those, again, this is something that you can reach out to us and we can help explain. And so, like I said, this is we've wanted to keep this a bit high level, and we also wanted to focus on how we can help you. And then I can see that we actually have a bit of time to take questions, so that's great. But we really wanted to take this time to let you know how we see things as a compliance consultancy, and it's important to break the elephant into smaller bits when you eat it. So all these questions that you had, that we tackled at the beginning, are you in scope or not? You saw all the hoops you have to go through, this funnel that I drew. Are you an SPM at all? Are you under a derogation scenario? Which HS codes do you have to follow if you have to report? These are all examples of questions that can come up. There can be others. We're always fascinated by the questions we receive when clients, come to us. We realize that every situation is unique. So for this, we can help with an auditing service. So before you even take action on your own to report, if you're not quite sure, and sometimes you do need this information also internally to justify your strategy at company level, we have this auditing service. Once that is done, it may be that you need some testing or that you need some calculations made before you even report, or to prove that you're out. Degradation testing, solubility testing we didn't put here, but this is something that on an ad hoc basis we can help you with. We also have partners that can help with this. So, but this is something where you can just come to REACH Law and we can work it out with you. Emissions calculation, that's the same. Applying this bow tie methodology, you've never done it. This is an ad hoc service. If you come to us, we can also try and see what are your needs and help you with this side of things. Something we didn't list here as well, but the analytical testing that you might need to prove even the size, or if you are a polymer at all this information that you need at the ready for the enforcement authorities. This is also something where we would encourage you on an ad hoc basis to come to us. And then when all this pre-auditing is done and you are ready to report, so to speak, we help you with the reporting, all the steps. So we look at the data you have, the list you have made in a phase 1, how you've grouped, and then we format the information in the way that is expected by the ECHA portal, the REACH IT account that we can set up for you if you don't have one, creating a Euclid file, that's the phase 2. And then finally we report, and something that we did not mention today is that you have to do this yearly. You have to update every year. So we can also help with that, of course. So some of you will have done all the homework in-house and will need to report. We help with the reporting. And some of you will need to answer all of those questions before deciding whether to report or not, and we can help with that as well. And on that, I think that takes us nicely to a Q&A session, and I'm pleased to say that we actually have more than 15 minutes, so you're going to grill me and see the full extent of the stuff that I don't know yet. That's always the scary part, right? And we're going to do it so that I'm going to look a bit now briefly through the chat to see what I've got, and I guess I've only seen one. Okay, and we've got some that we received in advance. So now's your time to send more. Yes, there are some more coming in. So I'm going to look at the pre-questions I got and try and help you. So I'm going to group those. We get a lot of questions on what's going on for non-EU manufacturers, on importers, on sellers. So yeah, we've been in touch, and only representatives, we have been asked that as well. We've been in touch with ECHA, and our preliminary assessment is that based on their answer, which was a bit vague, is that, well, when you're the importer that also places on the market, and in REACH, placing on the market is passing along in the supply chain is placing on the market. If you're an importer, you have to report if you are placing on the market. Now, only representatives normally can fulfill all the obligations of importers under REACH. So normally we think only representatives could do this. But again, don't take this as legal advice. This is a webinar. We are still going to figure it out with the Commission. We are trying to get confirmation from this. But I think rule of thumb is to remember that the placing on the market is actually occurring every time you pass along in the supply chain. So you may have situations where you have several actors in the supply chain that have to report. And that's where it gets confusing because the restriction tries to avoid that. or at least that was one of the stated intentions, to not have double reporting. So again, each scenario has to be looked at individually. Do come to us, because there are times where it's going to be relatively clear-cut and we'll be able to tell you with confidence, report, and some others where we might have to consolidate a bit more the thinking, so that you, if you think you don't have to report, you need to have a kind of answer for competition, for competent authorities if they need it. We had a question that asked, when will the Euclid's template and guidance be available? So it is, that's what we've just shown you. This is what you can find on the ECHA website. Who is the enforcement body? We've answered this as well. National authorities are the one who enforce the obligations. Someone asked how to report substances that are soluble or biodegradable. So in theory, you shouldn't have to report for those. You're completely out of scope. But again, it's one of those where, you know, just based on the answer like that, that's my gut feeling. But please come with a longer description and we can see how we can help. How long does it usually take for ECHA to review and clear the dossiers of SPMs? Is there any possibility in which nanomaterials are restricted in the same way as microplastics in the future? That's a very interesting question. So for the first part, this is uncharted territory, so we can't really tell you. But it's interesting here to say that they don't have that much to review, in the sense that ECHA is meant to be the repository of the number of emissions, the amount of emissions data gathered per year. But it's also our understanding that unlike REACH dossiers, you know, they are not really the ones who they are not going to have the power to go out and check the accuracy. This would be on member states. And here we have been asked also by others, will there be a registration, a kind of registration number, a trace? This is also something we're asking, because we've not seen in any guidance documents if you're going to have basically a way to show that you've complied to the member states, because they should normally have access. They have a portal on their side, national authorities, but it would be good if you have one document that shows that you have indeed sent your emissions data. On nanomaterials, yes, I mean, that's at least my feeling, that it could be restricted in the same way in the future, or that you could have a similar kind of emissions reporting or reporting requirement on the nanomaterials you place on the market and so on. That was at least one of the ideas in the REACH revision, but we know it's been delayed, and who knows what's going to happen to the REACH revision. Everyone is a bit on tenterhooks right now, so I can't really tell you if it's going to happen at all or not, but some have floated this idea of having this kind of register. With regards to the endless surveys we get if our products contain none of these, what is the best way to prove we don't have them? I'm not sure I understand this question. So, but I think we get often this question in the chemical world, how do you prove a negative, you know? But I guess here analytical testing is the way to show, because it's based on dimensions. So that would be my guess. Bear in mind, I'm a lawyer, so when I answer technical things like this, it might be a bit wobbly. But I guess the idea is that you have your testing data to show if you're on the border and there might be a doubt, it might be a good idea to test to show that you're not a microplastic. An SPM. Experiences and methods on how to estimate environmental emissions was one of the questions. So I hope we've answered that by showing you the EU PC guidance and the Ocean Clean Sweep model. If you know of others, do tell us. But this really looks like it's the state of the art at the moment, and definitely the bow tie model that they've put out should be useful in a lot of the scenarios. So we get a lot of questions about compounds, formulations, and yeah, they look very challenging to answer on the spot right now. I understand that in practice, it probably happens quite a bit. So it's both in the chat here. Let me see, because now you all got alive and sent me a lot. So again, this is one of those where it takes me time also to already understand the question, so I wouldn't risk to answer you on the spot. But essentially, as you have to group under different codes for the reporting itself, I understand the base of your question, and this is something where, again, where we would have expertise to at least give you an idea, an interpretation of how we would do it. And for all these questions, in the end, it's always about having the good arguments in your back pocket, so to speak, to be able to answer questions if you are challenged by an enforcement authority. If you have a good scientific justification for having grouped the way you have grouped, this is normally enough, you know. If it's wobbly and if there's no justification, you might run into trouble. So that's usually a bit how consultants can help you on those ones. Again, about estimating emissions, I think we have covered that. If I use my SPM as raw material and my product liquid sold to industrial users is exempted, does my customer need to report to ECHA? So it looks like a fascinating case to look at in detail. This is exactly where the Commission guidance comes in, and they have a list of examples of when it happens, when you have glitter inside. The glitter glue is one of the examples that they give. So again, without having specifics, it's very difficult to tell me yes or no. It's one of those borderline questions where specifically you need to look at the guidance several times and form an interpretation. So again, here, like a bit of auditing can help you. So yeah, question on transport and importer and also doing transport. So again, here, whether you should report yes or no, gut feeling is yes, based on what I've read, but again, I need to see your specific case. So these were the pre-questions I received. So I hope you recognized yourself if I, when I answered those. There are some that I did skip because I did not fully understand them. I'm gonna look at the chat now to see, and again, caveat, I'm not sure I'm gonna be able to cover all of those, but let's have a quick look. So I get, again, here a very specific question on polymer solid products sold in film, sheet, or roll form. Does it not apply, or do you need an investigation required on composition? If so, which kind? I would not answer this one on the spot either. I'm not sure that it's exactly composition testing that you need here. You also need to have some information about how your material ends up as a solid polymer, let's say. But some testing data sounds like it is needed, or at least some material data. So again, that's something where we would need to look into the weeds with you to see how we can help, and also with an external partner that can look into this together with us. If my supplier, okay, if your suppliers do not provide information described in paragraph 7, will I, downstream users, have problems? will the plastic pellet be placed on market illegally, non-compliant? Yeah, this is a big one, and that's always an issue in REACH, isn't it? Those like sort of chain of custody, obligations. There's one interpretation in the guidance from industry that indeed it should be the one that is the supplier that covers the uses for all others than the supply chain. But if they haven't, does it fall on you? Do you then, if you are control, then report the other ones up the chain? This is why this is the right time to talk in your supply chain and to get the right sort of assurances that the data is there, or not, or at least that you have some sort of legal coverage that to show that you have tried to get the information and you don't have it. You can't report yourself because you don't have it yourself. But here, proof of best efforts is always kind of a way to deal with your situation with national authorities, and they are familiar with these kind of things. So again, you have to document your situation, but this is something where we can tell you more if we get in touch. There's a question I don't really understand. Yes, someone is trying to understand SPM present to confer a sought after characteristic. Are unintentionally SPM excluded? Yes, they are. The idea is that it's a polymer that you have added to a material for a specific purpose, for a specific use. But again, yeah, there are always borderline cases, questions, and the applicable guidance here can help to a degree. Are CEFIC guidance available for free on the website? So the ones that we've listed, they are not directly CEFIC guidance, but all the ones that we have shown to you, they're free. You will find them online easily. But I think CEFIC has actually deferred that work to the Plastics Association, which were a bit more, let's say, on their home turf, to not make a pun on this one, for to give the specialized advice on this one. So we have specific questions on labeling that I should look into. Where exactly should you put the labeling? The Cosmetics Europe guidance provides some help on that, I think. So a question whether exempted uses are also exempted from reporting. So I guess exempted, excluded. If you're excluded completely from the column 1, you're not at all covered by this restriction. So you don't have to report either. You're either not placing on them. You're both not subject to the placing on a market ban, and you also don't have to report your emissions. Okay, so those that degrade and those that are natural polymerization normally have nothing to do. But again, remember the disclaimer at the top. So do come to us with the question if you want, written legal opinion. And we look product by product. Okay, question about when to apply the HS code, whether it's in the product or in the final product. I would guess this is at the moment where you place it yourself on the market. So when the obligation is on you as operator not in the, because it might be further modified down the supply chain. I understand that, but I think you need to report the HS code of the product, of the SPM as you handle it, would be my gut feeling for this question. And now I see that we are just at the 1 o'clock mark for Western Europe. So there were still a few additional questions, but this is lunch break and I don't want to take over your time. I hope this has been useful to all of you. The questions for sure were fascinating. We're gonna do our best to try and answer those, the hard nuts we couldn't crack by email. And something I completely forgot and that you absolutely should do is to just get in touch with me. In our experience, this is how it works best. We look at your individual case and we see what fits the best. But what is good for you to know is that on this reporting obligation, whatever solution you need, this will be always a turnkey package. You can have all the components, some of the components, but you don't have to do the guesswork. We will make the formula for you. So do get in touch. I look forward to our next conversations on microplastics, and I wish you a very good day.